Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining this session. Myself, Gayatri. I welcome you all on behalf of Vartana for this webinar series. So for this quarter, as we're starting the year, as well as it's like the last quarter of this financial year, our theme would be basically based on revision and remediation. In today's session, we'll be talking about rethinking revision and remediation for smart schools part 1. All attendees will be receiving participation certificate from Vartana. So I will talk about in detail about the procedure of how to get the participation certificate at the end of the session. Kindly stay through. A request from my end would be please be participative and engaged throughout the session to get the maximum benefit out of this session. Let's move on for today's session. The agenda for today will be introduction and session objective. Then we look at revision and remediation. We'll also look at formative assessment and diagnostic assessment. Then we'll also look at Vartana programs, and then we'll close the session with the feedback. So as usual, before starting the session, we would like to understand about a participant. I'll be launching a poll right now. Kindly choose a relevant option of your profile and submit the same. I've launched a poll, so I would request everyone to choose the option of your profile and submit. I'm gonna publish the result. So as you can see, we have mostly teachers and school leaders on today's session. So I'm glad that we have most of the teachers participating today because this is specifically focused for teachers. And let's move back to our session. So this session we have divided into, see, if you see revision and remediation, it's a very huge thing, and we have divided into two parts. In first part, today will be part 1. We'll be exclusively focusing on to understand what is the difference between revision and remediation. And second important part of today's session is how can you use assessment tools to choose the right revision or remediation strategy, right? So thus, this is where the part 1 we will be discussing. In part 2, we'll get deep dive into about the strategy you can use for revision and remediation. So before moving on to understanding our point, I would like to know from the participant, what is the difference between revision and remediation according to you? So what do you mean by revision and what is remediation for you? If you can quickly put on the Q&A box, or if you raise your hand, I'll unmute from end. That would be great. So what is like revision and remediation? What is the basic difference according to you? Yes, and someone has mentioned here, revision is basically when we revise something. Remediation is something we find it, when we find it out something you could again put up and some other way. Wonderful, sir. I think you have mentioned it very clearly. Yes, revision is going through the course again and for better retention. Thank you. Thank you so much for putting down your points. Okay. If you have any other points, please put on the Q&A box. We'll quickly move on to see the definition of each one of this. So what is revision? Basically, as Saroj sir and Deep sir mentioned, it's a process of reviewing the course or the material, right? It's basically to make sure the students are understanding and they're able to get good grades and they're able to perform very well in the assessment. And why this revision is important? Because when you revise the material again, it will help you to have a better understanding. It will help you to have a better retention also. And majorly, this will help the students to reduce their exam anxiety. And that's why when it's a best time to do the revision, either before assessment, any kind of assessment, you can do revision, or if there is any kind of break, say for example, if there is a winter break, summer break, 10 days, 20 days, post that break also you can revise so that they know the concept and they're able to recall the knowledge. Or else you can do it post every chapter or post covering any important concept. So this is about revision. When you look at remediation, as someone already mentioned, if you get to know there is any kind of specific learning gaps in understanding any kind of skills or concept, that's where remediation comes into picture. You will have targeted intervention to make sure you have either you can use different programs or different approach to make sure the gaps are built and students are able to understand the concept. And if you look at why this is important, this will help you to provide individualized support to the students and also help you to minimize the learning gaps. So once they are able to understand the basic foundation or any basic knowledge, that will help them to boost the confidence, and that will also help them to master the key concept. So when is the best time to do remediation? When you immediately find there is a learning gap. Say for example, post-COVID, when schools are like completely shut down and when only online classes are going, we know online classes were not very effective for our students. So once they're back, we got to know there is a lot of learning gap has happened. So at that time, you will do remediation, right? Then if you find any kind of learning gap, or if you think that you're going to some advanced topic. Say, for example, so far you taught about addition and subtraction of one digit or two digit. Now we are quickly jumping into like multiplication of three-digit number or any different word problems. Then you will do to check whether these people are able having a strong foundational knowledge. You can even do it before assessment as well. So this is about revision and remediation, the basic difference, right? But also let's look in deep dive to what are the steps involved in like revision or remediation. First, we'll look at revision. So revision, before, as I said earlier, in this today's webinar, we'll be completely focusing on what are the assessment tools you can use to make sure that you're able to understand where your children are right now and you're able to choose the right revision or remediation strategy. So if you look at revision, since you're going to revise the same material again and again, the best assessment to start with would be formative assessment. So it will help you to understand what is the learning level of your child, whether they got the concept or whether they're able to have a better understanding. So once you've done the formative assessment, next step would be you're trying to choose what is the best revision strategy. Say for example, I have three different sets of students who are performing in different level. Like one group is like performing really good, like above 90% they are scoring, and one group is scoring like 50 or 60% and one group are below average. Now you have to like choose from the strategy, okay, which strategy would be best suitable for these different three subgroups. And finally, you have to do monitoring and evaluation. For any strategy you use, it's important to understand what is the impact or outcome you are getting by implementing the strategy. So that's how you do monitoring and evaluation. If you look at remediation on the other hand, it starts with diagnostic assessment. Why? Here our main idea is to understand what is the learning gap, where is the learning gap, or where is the misconception happened, right? To do that, the effective assessment tool would be diagnostic assessment. It will help you to clearly put down like where is the learning gap, right? Once you know that, the second step would be to have a targeted intervention plan, because you're not like re-emphasizing or enhancing their understanding. You are trying to build the understanding, so you need targeted intervention. And finally, here also the third step would be same. It would be monitoring and evaluation. It's important to know whether the strategy is working out or not, or we need to rework on the strategy. So if you look at revision and remediation flows, it's more or less similar. The idea here is that revision is like revising the concept once again, whereas remediation is fulfilling that or reducing the learning gap. Let's look with a simple example to understand revision and remediation better. Say for example, you're going to teach you addition of two-digit number, right? So how you start? You start with addition, and you know your class is performing very well, and then in revision you give lot of examples in addition, like either same example or in a different format. You try to make sure that entire class is able to solve the particular additional problem through different formats. This is revision, which we generally do it in a classroom. Whereas remediation, if you look at, you're going to start with two-digit addition, but you got to know not everyone is performing better. You also got to know there are students who are unable to understand what is two-digit number, basically, right? So what do? You first start with the basics for them. You try to make them understand how a two-digit number is formed, like with tens and ones. How many tens a 12 would contain? How many ones a 12 would contain? First, you clarify that particular concept. Then you slowly move on to introduce addition of single digit number. Like how do you do addition for single digit number? Once you are confident in that, slowly you will move to addition of two digit number. So this is how you do remediation. So if you look at the difference, the left hand side of revision is like re-emphasizing on the same thing again and again, and making sure they have better understanding. Whereas in remediation, you're trying to go back to the basics to make sure they understand or they have the foundational knowledge to perform two-digit addition. So this is the basic difference between these two. So before moving on to the next slide, I would quickly launch a poll here to make sure that I'm starting a poll to understand from you, according to you, what is the right time to do revision? Of you mentioned in the comment box. Yes, Saroj ma'am. Yes, thank you for your answers. Deep sir, thank you for your answer. Remediation is a process to equip children with prerequisite knowledge. Wonderful. Yes, that's what remediation is. Thank you so much for all your input. Coming back to the poll. So I'll just publish the poll here. So if you see, many of you have voted like before exam, the most voted would be post every chapter. That's the best way you can do revision, right? After completing any chapter, if you do revision, you know how your class is or how your class understanding lies. And then before exam, yes, that also works. Before moving on to advanced topics or after exam, I would say that would be falling under remediation. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your input on poll. Moving forward, so we'll start with formative assessment for revision. So we said in revision, the first step would be formative assessment. So in today's webinar, we'll be focusing on assessment only. So if you look at formative assessment, let's try to understand what is the purpose of formative assessment, right? We are all very comfortable in doing formative assessment because this will help you to understand what is the students have achieved with respect to learning over a specific period. Say, for example, post every chapter or post every term or post 1 month, post 1 week, what is the knowledge they have gained? So this will help you to choose the right revision strategy to make sure your students are scoring very well in the exam. So if you look in detail about what it is formative assessment, what is this formative assessment is all about, you can conduct this particular formative assessment at the end of the chapter or at the end of the term, but it is heavily graded, right? It's like completely graded or completely mark based. This will help you to have a clear understanding how much my students have learned or what is the strategy I should make sure that they are scoring much better marks. So how do you do formative assessment? You can have like at the end of the chapter test or unit test or some achievement test, right? Like to make sure that whether they're able to achieve the benchmark you have set, or through some standardized tests like AFL exam, term exam, or final projects. So this would be suitable for all grades, like from LKG to 12th standard. So I'm quickly going to show a small example of formative assessment. I hope you all can see my screen. So this is the formative assessment for grade 5 on subject English. Here the teacher has precisely chosen the domain as grammar. So if you look at it, there will be lot of questions about grammar, and all questions are in a different format. There is fill in the blanks, there is like you have to write a sentence, and there is like match the following, or you have to describe. So if you see, he or she is covering the entire grammar domain by asking multiple questions in a different format. So this format is all over. It's not about a difficulty or it's not about like how easy it is, right? It starts in a different way and it ends in a different way. So this is about formative assessment. Once you conduct this assessment, you will get to know which area my child is performing very well or my student is performing very well, right? And then you will choose the right revision strategy. So this is about formative assessment. Moving back, now, if you look at what is diagnostic assessment, then I am pretty sure every one of you must have used like different types of formative assessment in your classroom. Diagnostic assessment is something very different. The purpose here would be to specifically identify the learning gaps and to provide targeted teaching, right? Or to have targeted intervention. That's the only purpose of diagnostic assessment. So if you look at, it will help you to identify what is the strength of your particular student, right? This particular concept. Say, for example, he or she is good in addition, he or she is good in multiplication, right? Or whether they have any weakness area, whether they have any misconception. They are not able to identify the symbols, operation symbols, whether it's if plus means addition, like minus means subtraction. If they're not able to identify that, then there is a misconception. And it will help you to build or reduce that misconception or build better understanding. So how do you do diagnostic assessment? You'll have preset test, right? Before starting any concept, you can have a small test, or you can conduct some quizzes, or you can even have concept maps. Say, for example, you want to make sure whether they are able to understand respiratory system. So you are asking them to do some concept mapping. So you are pretty much able to see how they are making connection from one element to another element. And then you can do self-assessment as well. And finally, it will be suitable for all the grades. So since diagnostic assessment is something very new to most of you, we would be deep diving into how to build diagnostic assessment. Now we have understood what it is, why it is important, but how exactly I should replicate in my classroom. That's what we are going to see in the next step. So before moving on to that, I would like to ask a quick question to all of you. Have you ever tried any kind of diagnostic assessment in your classroom? If so, what are the approaches you have tried? Like, how did you carry out diagnostic assessment in your classroom? Kindly put it in Q&A box, or you can even put it in the chat box. You can raise your hands as well. Have you tried any method? Like post-COVID, once the school has resumed, you must have seen a lot of learning gaps, right? Or you must have expected a lot of learning gaps. How did you identify? Like, what is the approach you took there? Yes. So somebody has mentioned that I've started with basic grammar, that is part of speech in every class. Yes. Okay. So here, ma'am has started with like basic grammar, like starting from parts of speech, and she was able to understand where the children are basically lacking. Thank you so much, ma'am.
For my classes, what we have done, that
Sir.
where the children were not having any prerequisite knowledge about a particular topic, then we have started with the process of differential instructions. So there, like if a child of like class 8th is unable to handle, uh, say like a topic based on transformation of sentences based on structure. So what we did, we took them to another level, a level low, say like class 7, class 6 level, and from there we started on with them. The whole class went on with the same standards as per the book, but the children who were struggling in that topic, we started off with that differential set of instructions, differential learning, and differential teaching that ways. So this is
Wow,
what we did.
great. Sir, if I ask a follow-up question over here, how did you identify the children are actually struggling?
The best way to identify, as you said, is remediation is a process where it becomes very easy for the teacher to identify a child with a learning gap, right? As a teacher, I what I can say is I understand my students well. Every teacher understands their student well, right? So it is very easy for a teacher to identify, I mean, that which child is actually struggling or lagging behind, or as is having learning gaps. So uh, I mean, it's very simple. I mean, I don't have any special words for that, but yes, I know who are the children who struggle in my subject. So what I do is I take up the remediation process. Every time I start off with something, I just conduct the accession classes, in the sense that what we studied last time, that we do normally, that we do the revisions, then we take up the topic further, and for the last 5 minutes, then we do the a revision of that particular topic, what we have studied in that particular span of time of 40 minutes. So this is how we do it.
Thank you so much, sir. As sir actually rightly mentioned, right? Um, Teacher know the student really better, right? Really well, because they observe them through all the times, and they observe them through different situation as well. So a teacher knows student really better. I think I totally agree with you, sir. Thank you so much for sharing your input. So in Q&A box, we have many inputs here. So for higher secondary students, Manjuma mentioned that they have conducted quizzes, surveys, and informal debates, and there are also baseline tests somebody has conducted, and then somebody yes, Saroj ma'am has mentioned us, she has started asking and interacting with to understand what they know, and then they have built a child lab. Thank you so much everyone for sharing your input. So moving on here we are going to like, I am going to reiterate what sir said. You know your student really well, right? But then why do you need tool? Because you need certain data to support your conclusion or your decision or your argument, right? So there are certain set of data you need to have to make sure that you are traveling in a right path. That's why these assessment tools help us to like make sure that we are selecting right strategy or right method for particular student. So if you look at that here, we are going to talk about how to build a diagnostic assessment tool. So this is a tool which you have already built and we have tested, and it was very clearly shows what is the learning gap in the students. The first step in building a diagnostic assessment tool is first you have to choose the domain. Like ma'am has mentioned, in grammar she has chosen parts of speech, right? So for any grade, we are going to discuss with an example. See, for example, in class 4, I'm going to choose subject English, and here my focus want to test or choose grammar as a domain. And second step here would be to choose a subdomain. Okay, the grammar is a vast topic. Where should I actually start from, right? So here what I'm going to do, I'm going to start from punctuation. Okay, now I've chosen a subject, domain, and subdomain. What is the next step? Now, what I'm going to test, right? What is the competency I'm going to test? So my competency is that whether my students are able to choose correct punctuation marks and complete the sentence. This is the competency. You should know what you are testing for. Then only you know what you have to look in the outcome. And then fourth important point is which type of cognitive skill you are going to test. As many of you are aware that we have Bloom's taxonomy, which starts from remember and goes up to create, right? So remember would be the basic cognitive skill level. It would be level 1. Remember means basically remembering the facts. Say for example, who invented this? Who invented telephone? Or who invented or who discovered gravity? So all these are facts which requires only remember as a cognitive skill. The next level 2 would be understand. Here the children has to understand what is the concept about, right? Able to understand interrelation between concept, interrelation between, say for example, why gravity is interrelated to tides and waves, what its impact, right? And then application would be the third level of cognitive skills, where they are able to apply the knowledge they have gained. So that's all, right? And it goes up to evaluate, create. But what I would recommend is that focus on these three cognitive skill importantly, then you can move to the fourth level. So here what I'm going to test is that I'm going to check whether they're able to apply the knowledge, basically testing their application skill. Fifth one, important one, is typology. What type of questions you're going to ask? There are multiple type of questions, right? You have multiple choice question, match the following, fill in the blanks, and then you have like open-ended question, close-ended question. So which type of questions you're going to use or test this particular competency for this particular grade? So this is the basic structure for designing any diagnostic assessment tool. So I would request everyone to remember these 5 steps. I'm going to show a bit more of one more example here, a little bit right here. See here, for example, again, grade 4 English we have chosen. If you look at the domain, so I'm starting with picture comprehension. I'm slowly increasing the domain difficulty level. I'm starting with picture comprehension, moving on to reading, and then grammar, and then classroom instruction. Now I have to choose subdomain for each of domain. So if you look at reading, I'm specifically focusing on reading comprehension. If you look at grammar, there are like 4 different things I've chosen: parts of speech, tenses, opposites, punctuation. So if you look at the third column, competency, you can read line by line, right? So for example, under picture comprehension, my competency would be whether they're able to answer the question based on the picture. I'm going to show them some picture and they have to just able to answer, right? Whether they're able to read the what is there in the picture and answer the question. That's all. So here the cognitive skill would be understand, whether they're able to understand the given picture. I'm going to test it using a multiple choice question. Whereas if you look at reading comprehension, the first one is they have to understand the feature of the story. What is this, right? Say for example, I'm talking about a cat and a child. So he or she should understand all the facts inside mentioned inside the comprehension. He or should able to answer any direct question or indirectly framed question or any infer questions, right? Say, for example, what did you infer from this story? Why did Sita choose this particular thing? So all these are inference. This is the competency we are testing. If you look at the cognitive skill, just looking at the story would fall under remember, whereas directly framing question or indirectly framed question will fall under understand cognitive skill. Inference will always fall under application. So if I ask a particular paragraph and I ask them what did they infer from, here they're applying their knowledge. Whatever they learned, they're applying. And I'm going to test all these things using multiple choice question. Coming on to grammar, parts of speech, if you look at ability to complete a paragraph by filling correct punctuation. So here they have to apply the knowledge. And my question would be in the fill in the blanks format. If you look at the tenses, give the past tense for the given word. Again, they have to apply knowledge and it will be one word response. So if you look at this entire table, it starts from basic skill like remember and understand, and there will be like it goes up to application. And if you look at this particular table, remember question, we have only one question, and slowly we are focusing on understand, where 4 questions are based on understand, and the highest amount of questions are based on application, because we want our children to able to apply the knowledge. So our the best way to do is that have more and more application based questions rather than remember. Remember will not help you to know what is the misconception or learning gap they are having. We'll also look at a quick example here to understand better. So again, this is Vartana comprehensive assessment tool. This is for grade 5. So I'm just going to go through the entire test tool here. It starts with the reading comprehension. The reading comprehension is very, very small and basic reading comprehension. It's a discussion about a Tara and a grandmother. Here I want you to more focus on the questions you are asking. So if you look at the first questions, it's just to remember. It is already there in the paragraph. He or she has just have to look at the paragraph and answer. And then slowly, if you look at the last question, why do you think it is important? Here, inference comes into picture, where knowledge, application comes into picture. And then we are slowly moving into fill in the blanks. Then if you look at the second set of question, we are asking again pronoun, adjectives, which is fill in the blanks, and then moving into opposites, synonyms. And then slowly, if you look at, we want them to write a sentence for the given, we have already given a sentence, we want them to change the sentence to different tenses. And if you look down, finally, we end the question paper with a big paragraph asking them to write a few words about a topic which we are given. So writing would be the highest skill we are expecting from the child, because it's an application of knowledge, right? So here, your diagnostic tool should be in such a way that you are building from basic and you're increasing the difficulty level. You're starting with remembering cognitive skill. You have good amount of question in understand and more amount of question in application. That's how you build the diagnostics tool. So here I would like to make a small connection. So you might be wondering, I don't have enough time to do formative. I don't have enough time to diagnostic, right? The best or the suitable way for all of you would be start with formative assessment. Say, for example, I'm quickly jumping onto this tab. Start with the formative assessment, which I've already shown you. You want to test a particular chapter. Here we are talking about grammar, right? Start with that, and then correct the children paper, and then you see what are the area most of them are struggling, right? Say, for example, they're struggling in reading comprehension, they're struggling in punctuation, or they're struggling in tension. See what are the areas they are struggling, and then for those areas alone, try doing this diagnostic assessment, because revision will help you to just see where they are scoring high, where they are formative assessment will help you to understand where they are scoring high, where they are scoring low. That's all, right? Whereas diagnostic assessment will help you to understand the misconception. So you know there are 3 areas you want to work. I want to work on punctuation, reading comprehension, and tenses. So you build this particular diagnostic assessment focusing on these 3 areas alone, making sure there is good amount of question in understanding skill and application skill. Then correct this. Then you will get to know where this misconception happening. Whether my students are unable to understand the difference between past tense and present tense, or whether they're able to like make some misconception within particular topic. Then you can choose the right strategy to rectify it. So you can make this interrelation, or you can like have both your assessment working very well for your classroom. Moving back to our tab, so we will share all these things with you. So what I would recommend is that first start with this particular table, right? Where you are deciding domain, subdomain, competency, cognitive typology. Once this is ready, it's very easy to frame the questions because you know what you want to test, how you want to test, which skill you want to test. It's very easy to frame the question. Post this. Now, here there are few resources which we would like to show you. You can use it for both formative assessment and diagnostic assessment as well. Some of you are already familiar with Khan Academy. I'll quickly show two examples here. So if you look at Khan Academy, so they have a lot of topics for different subject and different class. I'm going to choose class 6 factors and multiples. Here you have all the chapter, right? So here you can have, if you look at the last, you can start with course challenge. So there is a good amount of questions for you to make sure you can design these questions to your classroom and use it as a diagnostic assessment tool as well. So it will help you to understand where is a misconception happening. Whereas the second resource which I'm going to share is to super teacher worksheet. If you look at, you have like worksheet for multiple things, right? I've selected math concept. I've selected like this one would be measure angles with protector for class 4 to 6. So if you look at view PDF, I'm just gonna show you. So you have very engaging worksheet for you, right? So these are worksheet, but you can also have it as a formative assessment test. Once you finish the measuring angles, you can give this particular worksheet for them to see whether they're able to understand the concept between angles. So you can go back and see, these are the different resources we have. There are many other resources as well, but go back and understand each and every resource, like see whether how much this will be suitable for your classroom. Moving ahead, we discussed like a lot of things today, right? We started with what is revision, what is remediation, what is the difference between these two, and how do you make sure your assessment tool help you to choose the right strategy. So there are other things which you have to keep in mind. First one is, for I'm going to talk about both revision and remediation. So to choose any strategy for these two, there are few things you have to keep in mind. One, with respect to revision strategy, you have to identify the learning level of the child. Like then you can create subgroup as well, but first you need to understand like the learning level of your children. Then you have to know what is the resource constraint you have, whether you have very less time. I have only 1 month time, my exams are going to come, what should I do? So understand your resource constraint with respect to time, resources, all of these things. And then create subgroups according to the learning level. Create subgroups and set clear goals for each and every subgroup, what you want to achieve post the revision. By setting all these things will help you to choose your revision strategy. Whereas with respect to remediation, first identify the learning gaps. Where is the misconception or which learning skill they are unable to perform? Then here also you need to understand resource constraint, because remediation requires different strategy and different time frame from revision. Then understand the learning style. Since it's kind of an individualized support you're going to offer for remediation, you need to know through which way your students are learning at the best. Whether kinesthetic method or visual or audio, you should know the learning style of your student and then set clear goals for them. By keeping all these things in mind, you will be able to choose the right remediation strategy. So this is the one thing which we want to emphasize from this session, like how you can choose the remediation strategy. In second part, we'll be focusing deep diving into what are the different strategy is there, and from these two sessions you will get an inference like how to choose, what to choose. We'll see two case studies here. So case one, I'll be launching poll as well. So case one, in class 5, there's a science teacher who got to know like there are some students who are scoring really, really less, right? And you can see all of them are making similar mistakes here and there. So here, what assessment tool would be most appropriate in this scenario to identify the misconception? So I'll quickly launch a poll. So there are three options you have. Whether the teacher should use diagnostic assessment or summative assessment or formative assessment to identify the misconception. So I would request everyone to please vote. This is like a small thing for us to reflect on what did we see in today's webinar. So here the purpose is that teacher has to find why there is a set of students making similar mistake. So why it's happening and what tool he or she should use to identify the misconception. Then Saroj ma'am has asked whether these applications are free. Khan Academy Super Teachers are free, ma'am. Like there are other two applications which is also free, but you have to sign in to download the worksheet. I'm just going to publish the result. As you can see, many of you mentioned diagnostic assessment correctly. Yes, diagnostic assessment helps you to identify the misconception. Moving on to the next case study. Here the case is, it's just not case study, just a reflection on what did we see in webinar. So what comprises the three-step procedure for revision? So what are the steps for revision, right? I'm going to launch a poll now. What are the three-step process for a revision? So your options would be conducting diagnostic assessment, do targeted teaching and track the progress. Second option would be conduct formative assessment, choose revision strategy and evaluate the progress. Final option is examine patterns, compare subgroups and get feedback. What are the three steps for revision? In option it is mentioned as summative. Sorry for the error. It's formative. Right? Summative, formative are more or less similar, but many times we think summative is like year-end exam. But you can use summative as post-exam as well. So it's formative basically. So I'm going to publish the result. As you can see, many of you voted for diagnostic assessment. Diagnostic assessment help you to choose remediation strategy, not revision strategy. You can use, but it would be more suitable for remediation. Whereas conducting a formative assessment and choosing a revision strategy and examining would be the three-step process for revision. Thank you everyone for sharing your opinion. Moving back, let's summarize what did we see in today's webinar, right? So the three things would be, very first thing is that revision or remediation, it's not just for like getting good marks or to make sure that like my school is performing very well. The major purpose for revision and remediation is more deeper, right? Here it's a chance for you to make sure the children are having or deeper knowledge about the concept or subject and they're able to retain the knowledge. So that's the important I would say important thing for revision and remediation. The second thing is that assessment plays an important role. Don't see assessment as just an exam you conduct and give marks and move on, prepare them for next test and move on. No, assessment tools actually tell you the learning level of your children, what is happening within the children, what are the misconceptions they're having, where are they struggling. You can leverage the assessment tool to choose the best strategy for revision and remediation. And third point would be, generally we all tend to go back to our like routine traditional revision method, right? We give set of questions to the students, we ask them to reread or rewrite, so that we are thinking that will help them to improve the grade. That might have a short term success, but long term success always will be having an by choosing an effective revision and remediation strategy. How do you do that? Your data will help you, your assessment data will help you to choose the revision and remediation strategy which will have a long-term success. So in part 2 we'll deep dive into understanding like what are the different strategy available, and you can choose from these two which strategy will be suitable more for a classroom. Moving on, next we'll also look at like the academic solution partners of Vartana. So here we have two things. One is Lead School will help you to have an innovative tech-based learning solution in your school. It will has a world-class curriculum where it offers other materials also. It will help your students to excel in both English and coding skills. And whereas in Kayan is a multimedia computer with a data projector, which helps teacher to have a very high engaging and stimulating classroom, which will also have a great learning space. If you like to know more about these programs or products or any other programs Vartana offers, please write on or reach out to us at hello@vartana.com, and our toll-free number would be this one. Kindly make a note of it. If you want to contact us for any reason, please reach out to us through email or the given contact number.